Bienvenidos a esta nueva sesión del Webinario Internacional en Educación Continua en Vía Aérea, evento organizado por el Programa de Anestesiología y Reanimación de la Universidad Diego Portales. El programa de Anestesiología y Reanimación de la Universidad Diego Portales es dirigido por el doctor Ricardo Latrop Allende, quien es el director del programa. Este programa tiene por objeto formar un especialista capaz de ejercer la anestesiología en forma integral, entregando al paciente una atención acorde con la evolución de la especialidad, adaptándose a los cambios epidemiológicos y al desarrollo de la tecnología. Este es un programa acreditado por la Comisión Nacional de Acreditación CNA de Chile. Les presento a nuestras autoridades de la Facultad de Medicina, la doctora Patricia Muñoz Casas del Valle, quien es nuestra decana de la facultad, y el doctor Antonio Eblen Sahur, quien es el director de la Escuela de Posgrado. También contamos con el importante apoyo científico de la Sociedad Europea de Vía Aérea, la EAMS, y del grupo FIDIVA de la Formación Internacional en Docencia e Investigación en Vía Aérea. Queremos invitarlos muy cordialmente a unirse a la Sociedad Europea, la EAMS, a través de este sitio web de eamshq.net o también activando el código QR que tienen en su pantalla. Los beneficios de ser miembro, algunos de ellos son la suscripción online a la revista Trends in Anesthesia and Critical Care, donde publican muchos expertos internacionales de gran prestigio. También pueden tener acceso preferencial a contactar speakers y de renombre mundial si organizan un evento o curso. Pueden obtener una investigación colaborativa en vía aérea coordinada por la EAMS. También hay una red de residentes. Únanse a los jóvenes entusiastas en la vía aérea para formar una red mundial. También hay posibilidad de formar un council y representar a tu país ante la EAMS. Hay descuentos en inscripciones en eventos científicos y ustedes recibirán el artículo del mes seleccionado por expertos de la EAMS. Si ustedes acceden al sitio web para este efecto, tienen que los anestesiólogos ir al grupo B, donde están el precio especial para todos los países de Latinoamérica, con una membresía de valor reducido a 35 euros al año, y el grupo C, los residentes, estudiantes no académicos y no médicos, que tienen el mismo valor. Así que desde ya los dejamos invitados a unirse a esta gran sociedad europea de vía aérea. Tenemos la gran ventaja de contar con un servicio de traducción simultánea a través de la empresa Traducciones Remotas, y ustedes pueden seleccionar el canal de idioma de su preferencia, ya sea el portugués, el inglés o el español. Los invitamos muy cordialmente a participar. Este es un webinario totalmente participativo, así que pueden ustedes hacer preguntas o comentarios levantando la mano en el botón de reacciones que tiene en la parte baja de su pantalla. Y también pueden enviarnos sus saludos a través del chat. Nos encanta saber desde dónde nos están viendo, desde dónde se están contactando, y podemos contestar preguntas y también pueden hacer comentarios directamente al chat. Aquí tienen ustedes la planilla de grandes expertos mundiales que tenemos invitados para el año 2024. Entre ellos hay expertos de Italia, Sudáfrica, Canadá, República Checa como el de hoy, la India, España, Irlanda, Portugal, por supuesto Chile, Estados Unidos y Alemania. Aquí ustedes pueden ver el programa con las fechas y los speakers y los títulos de lo que van a hablar cada uno de ellos en los próximos webinarios. Queremos invitarlos también a participar en este estudio que está auspiciado por la EAMS, que es el estudio AWARE, que es una encuesta internacional acerca de la intubación traqueal vigil. Se van a demorar unos 10 minutos más o menos en contestar las preguntas y que van a servir para formarse una opinión de una visión de lo que ocurre con esta técnica que da la impresión de que es subutilizada. Bueno, para mí es un gran agrado tener hoy día en nuestro webinario al doctor Pavel Michalek, que anestesiólogo checo que realizó su formación en su país y entre el 2005 y 2010 se desempeñó como interconsultor de vía aérea en el Hospital de Área de Antrim en Irlanda del Norte. Desde el año 2010 trabaja en el Hospital General Universitario de Praga, República Checa, que es un gran hospital docente ubicado en el corazón histórico de Praga. En 2008 fue premiado con el diploma de la Sociedad Europea en Anestesiología y en 2003 obtuvo la maestría en manejo del dolor en el Hospital Universitario Queen's de Belfast. El doctor Michalek es miembro fundador de la sección de manejo de la vía aérea de la Sociedad Checa en Anestesiología, Reanimación y Cuidados Intensivos. Es miembro de la Difficult Airway Society del Reino Unido desde el 2005 y de la EAMS desde el 2013. El doctor Michalek organiza en su país cursos regulares de manejo de la vía aérea, tanto de nivel básico como avanzado, y participa también en cursos y talleres en todo el mundo. En 2019 recibió la distinción de Fellow de la EAMS por sus importantes aportes a la educación en vía aérea. En 2021 obtuvo el grado de MBA en el Instituto de Negocios de Praga. Desde el 2023 es miembro del directorio de la EAMS. De esta manera, el doctor Michalek ha estado involucrado por años en la docencia e investigación, ha sido autor de varios libros, muchos artículos y se ha desempeñado como editor asociado o revisor para revistas médicas. Su pasión de vida está en el manejo de la vía aérea, abarcando desde el prehospitalario al quirófano y la docencia. Actualmente trabaja principalmente en el área de anestesiología cardiovascular y torácica, técnicas de acceso vasculares y procedimientos maxilofaciales en el Hospital General Universitario de Praga. Cuando no está trabajando, a Pavel le encanta jugar tenis, escalar cumbres montañosas o tocar su guitarra electroacústica. En las temporadas de invierno se dedica a todo tipo de experiencias en el esquí. Es así como nos sentimos muy honrados de recibir hoy en nuestro webinario no solo a un gran experto, sino porque por sobre todo a un amigo, quien generosamente dedica hoy parte de su tiempo a traernos su experiencia en un tema muy relevante y posiblemente poco difundido que se relaciona con el uso de los dispositivos supraglóticos en la vía aérea difícil. Así que te damos la bienvenida, querido Pavel, a nuestro webinario y los invitamos a todos ustedes a responder unas preguntas que van antes de la charla del doctor Michalek.
Ok.
La primera pregunta es, ¿ha realizado alguna vez una intubación fibroscópica a través de un dispositivo supraglótico durante su carrera? Ahí está respondiendo. Parece que no hay más respuestas, pero hay una clara tendencia. Ahí tenemos los resultados. Pavel, la gran mayoría, 91%, nunca ha realizado una intubación fibroscópica a través de un dispositivo supraglótico. Y eso es muy notable. No sé si quieres decir algo al respecto.
Okay, so it's quite surprising, but the practice can vary worldwide. We will see during the lecture afterwards if some people will change their mind.
Ok. Vamos a la segunda. La segunda ¿es algún dispositivo supraglótico de segunda generación parte obligatoria de su carro de vía difícil? Se refiere que su servicio siempre hay un dispositivo supraglótico de segunda generación. Parece que ya estamos listos. A ver, ¿no? Nadie más. Perfecto. ¿La has terminado, Gabriela? La votación. Ese es el resultado final, parece. Un tercio no tiene, un tercio de de las personas que han contestado no tienen dispositivos supraglóticos de segunda generación en su carro de vía aérea difícil. 2 tercios sí. Vamos a la tercera.
No, no.
Tercera. Pregunta, ¿consideraría usted realizar una intubación fibroscópica a través de un dispositivo supraglótico como plan inicial de manejo de vía difícil, vía aérea, en un paciente con vía aérea difícil reconocida o anticipada y no adecuado para realizar una técnica vigil? Es decir, en un paciente en que se anticipa que la vía aérea será difícil y que no es adecuado para realizar una técnica vigil, si uno optaría por usar una intubación fibroscópica a través de un dispositivo supraglótico. Ahí están votando. No sé si puedes ver la votación, Pavel.
No, I don't see the votes at the moment. I see
Ok,
just the
ok,
question.
ok, perfecto. Ok. Ahí está el
Yeah,
resultado.
I can see it now.
Dos tercios dicen que sí harían una intubación fibroscópica a través del supraglótico, y un tercio dicen que no lo harían.
Okay.
Entendiendo que la pregunta es el plan inicial.
Plan inicial, claro, porque es una vía aérea difícil anticipada en un paciente en que no es adecuado hacer una técnica vigil, porque se niega principalmente. Interesante. Muy bien, pues.
Very good.
Muchas gracias a todos por responder. Vamos directamente entonces a la charla. Tienes la palabra, Pavel.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Okay. So I am just starting the presentation.
Sí. Pantalla completa.
Yeah, I know, but I cannot open it now.
La pantalla completa. The full screen.
Okay, I can now. We can go. Okay. So good morning.
Eso es.
Good morning, everybody. Although my Spanish is very basic, I would dare to start my presentation in Spanish. Buenos días, estimados señoras y señores. Les traigo saludos desde Praga, la capital de la República Checa. Es un gran honor para mí que mi amigo el profesor Ricardo Ortubia me invite a presentar con muchos anestesiólogos de toda Sudamérica. Desafortunadamente, mi español no es suficiente para realizar toda la presentación. Todo el webinario presentado en inglés será interpretado simultáneamente al español y al portugués. Muchas gracias por participación de ustedes. Good morning, everybody. So, my name is Pavel Michalek, and I have to declare some conflict of interest because I've been working within the airway management research for almost 30 years, and during this time, I've received many samples free of charge of different devices, not only supraglottic ones, but with laryngoscopes and other types of devices as well. And I've also received some reimbursement for my lectures worldwide on European and world conferences. Very, very little about myself. So I am a lead consultant for airway management and vascular access at the General University Hospital in Prague, which is located in the heart of the Prague, capital of the Czech Republic. I used to work many years in the United Kingdom as a lead consultant in Antri Maria Hospital.
Con su equipo de trabajo también, con su novia María Lorenzo, su novia Argentina.
The NAP4 national audit of Royal Society and DAS. I've been a professor of anesthesiology at the Charles University First Medical Faculty for almost 10 years, and as well I am an officer with the board of directors of European Airway Management Society. You can see some pictures of the Czech Republic on the screen. Maybe, as you know, even in South America, the Czech Republic is the last world champion in ice hockey. From this year, we have in our country almost everything, but not sea. So you can see Prague is in the heart of the Czech Republic and in the heart of Europe. So you can see the pictures from the Prague. The left one and the right one are from the center of Prague. Then you can see some beautiful pictures of the Czech mountains as well. They are, of course, not as high as your Andes, but they are good source of joy for our skiers, bikers, and walkers during summer and winter time. This is my hospital. It's the second biggest hospital in the country and the eldest one. It was established in the 14th century, and the first current buildings were built in the 17th century. So some of these departments are still located in very historical buildings, as you can see on the left bottom image. But the interior of the hospital is very modern. You can see one of our 5 ICUs in the left upper image. My two-day talk is designated to the use of supraglottic airway management, supraglottic airway devices in difficult airway management, mainly as a conduit for fiber optic tracheal intubation. So in general, we can use supraglottic airway devices as bridging therapy for any patient with difficult airway who is indicated for general anesthesia, but not only for general anesthesia, but as well for tracheal intubation in emergency or intensive care settings. Why we use supraglottic airway devices in these indications? The first one, and the most important one, that they can allow us temporary management of patent airways, allowing both ventilation and oxygenation. And the third one, when our patient becomes stable, we can use this supraglottic airway device as a conduit for insertion of bougie, fibroscope, or even for direct tracheal tube placement. What is quite important that we can use modern supraglottic airway devices almost everywhere in our settings. So we can use them in elective theater cases. We can use them in the emergency room for the patients suffering from acute life-threatening condition. We can use them in the intensive care unit, for example, if we have troubles with tracheostomy or tracheal intubation in these patients. And we can use them quite frequently even in the pre-hospital setting for airway management of critically ill or even arrested patients. How it all started. So you can see the early 19th of the last century. I started my anesthetic career in 1992. And that time, this is me as a very junior anesthesiologist. And at that time, we had only 2 options available. And it was face mask, that black one, and tracheal tube, and nothing in between. But everything changed in the beginning of the 90s, because since the beginning of 80s of the last century, this man you can see on the image, Dr. Archie Brain from England, he started to develop his device called a laryngeal mask airway. So you can see the first prototype here, which was made of the black silicone cuff, inflatable one, and stem very similar to the tracheal tube. And Dr. Archie Brain published his first experience with this new device called a laryngeal mask airway in British Journal of Anesthesia in 1983. This device was in the first designated only for maintaining of patent airways during the elective surgery. And in coming years, Dr. Archie Brain started to use his laryngeal mask airway even in more advanced indications, such as in patients with obesity, in patients with anatomically or physiologically difficult airway. On the right bottom image, so you can see the definitive sample of the classic laryngeal mask airway, the first generation airway device. This first generation airway device consists only of the breathing stem and the cuff. So there is no mechanism for the drainage of gastric content. And now you can see on a quite rare video, one of the first insertions of the laryngeal mask airway performed by Dr. Archie Brain himself. So you can see the device was lubricated, the laryngeal mask inserted very quickly, the cuff inflated, and ventilation with the anesthetic machine initiated. So the insertion of the laryngeal mask airway took less than 10 seconds in total. And this is one of the characteristics of all well-performing supraglottic airway devices, that its insertion and interval to good maintenance of the patent airway and restoring ventilation oxygenation shouldn't be longer than 10 seconds. But Dr. Archie Brain wasn't the first thinking about the development of supraglottic airway devices. As you can see from the reports published even before the Second World War, the World War II, in 1935 in London, Sir Francis Shipway developed something which was quite similar to some of the first supraglottic airway devices. This device was actually quite similar to Cobra PLA supraglottic airway device. It was something like oropharyngeal airway with a special inflatable cuff at the end, compressing the root of the tongue and allowing ventilation. Very similar device was invented in the United States as well before the World War II in 1935, when Dr. Leach invented his pharyngeal bulb gasway. It was a new device allowing allowing cyclopropane anesthesia in these ages. Well, and now we are back to the 19th of the 20th century, shortly after development of Archie Brain's laryngeal mask and its complementation to the clinical practice. So first, the laryngeal mask was really designated only for elective airway management, but very shortly after that, several mainly British authors came with the ideas to use laryngeal mask airway classic or the first generation laryngeal mask in difficult airway management cases. So the first report came from Chad in 1989 when he blindly inserted tracheal tube, very narrow diameter tracheal tube through the laryngeal mask into the trachea. The second report And actually, that report involved the use of flexible fibroscope, came from this man on the right side of the image. It's Dr. Arthur Allison. I had the honor to work about 4 years in Northern Ireland with Dr. Arthur Allison. He's a Scottish guy, very good skier. He was a former Scottish champion in giant slalom as well, as you can see on these images. And Arthur Allison and his friend in Newcastle, they came with idea to observe the view through the classic laryngeal mask airway. And they were very surprised because more than 90% of them covered perfectly the vocal cords. So they intubated a series of patients with the laryngeal mask airway. The first targeted report on the use of fiber optic intubation through the laryngeal mask airway classic came from Silk and was published in the European Journal of Anesthesiology in 1991. There was one trouble actually with the fiber optic intubation through the laryngeal mask airway classic. And the trouble was that the diameter of the breathing bore, the airway stem, was too narrow to accommodate a tracheal tube of some diameter used routinely for males or females. So it could accommodate only tracheal tubes of size 6, which are sometimes not sufficient for airway exchange in mainly obese or well-built patients. Shortly after these first attempts on tracheal intubation through supraglottic airway devices, the first guidelines of Difficult Airway Society were released. So you can see them here. They were published in 2004, and that time intubating laryngeal mask airway was already developed, and you can see the plan B involved these two devices. So if initial attempts on direct laryngoscopy failed, the operators should insert either intubating laryngeal mask airway or classical laryngeal mask airway to help with the oxygenation airway exchange and potentially use the supraglottic airway device as conduit for tracheal intubation. If we look at the current difficult airway management guidelines from DAS 2015, so you can see that now there is not intubating laryngeal mask airway anymore or laryngeal mask airway classic, but there is any supraglottic airway device. I wouldn't mention here the Czech difficult airway management device, but they were published in 2018, and in these guidelines we stated that directly that it should be the second generation supraglottic airway device allowing any protection against aspiration of gastric contents, and as well the second generation supraglottic airway device with wide enough bore allowing direct tracheal intubation over the fibroscope. These are very recent ASA guidelines. They were created with the international contribution, so many friends from EMS participated on these guidelines. So you can see again here in these guidelines the role of supraglottic airway device in failed intubation drill. And again, these are the last one presented here in this presentation, Canadian Society guidelines, and you can see again that as an exit strategy, there is supraglottic airway device mentioned. We are returning back again to the historical aspect. So after the first attempts on fiber optic intubation through the classical laryngeal mask airway, Dr. Archie Brain and his team, Dr. Atul Kapila and Dr. Chandi Varghese, developed a novel device specifically invented for tracheal intubation and difficult airway management. And this device was named intubating laryngeal mask airway, or in the United States, actually sold under the name Fast Track. Then they again improved the design of intubating laryngeal mask airway, and they built in the camera inside with the optical fibers, and the device was called C-Track laryngeal mask airway. And this C-Track laryngeal mask airway was clinically tested first in 2006. And then there was tracheal intubation through other supraglottic airway devices described in literature later on, such through the iGel and other devices, and we will go to these points later on in the presentation. Of course, these plans or these techniques can be associated with some complications. Actually, all operators have complications. Who don't have any complications, they usually don't report honestly their practice. And you can see that very shortly after invention of intubating laryngeal mask airway, the cases of esophageal intubation were described, and they were associated mainly with the blind technique. Significant trauma was described as well, trauma to the vocal cords, proximal trachea, arytenoids, or trauma to the soft tissues such as oropharynx, epiglottis, or uvula. The most serious case was reported in 1999 when the blind intubation through the intubating laryngeal mask airway caused perforation of the esophagus with subsequent mediastinitis. And when performing the complication, mainly with inexperienced users, several mechanical damage can occur, such as kinking of the fibroscope, total damage of the fibers inside the fibroscope, or airway obstruction. Intubating laryngeal mask airway was considered in the 90s as a gold standard as conduit for blind tracheal intubation. The success rate with the blind technique was described as higher or close to 90%. Fiber optic intubation was described, but in some papers it was described as technically difficult. Why? Because there was a special bar on the bowl of the intubating laryngeal mask airway, and it could interfere with the fibroscope. And insertion of this device actually required minimal mouth opening, at least of 2.5 to 3 centimeters. This is the first paper on the intubating laryngeal mask airway, published by Archie Brain, and subsequent papers published of this team. So the first paper actually is related to the development of the device, so mainly technical paper, and the following two papers are devoted to the first clinical uses of this new device. I would like to share this very nice video with you, and this video was made mainly for advertisement of performance of this device, and it shows Dr. Chandi Varghese demonstrating of this device. So you could see that this device was inserted by Dr. Atul Kapila on Chandi Varghese himself after anesthetizing of the trachea. So the device was inserted without any difficulties. The cuff was inflated, and now you could see Dr. Archie Brain checking the position of the vocal cords with the fibroscope, and Chandi Varghese himself. And Chandi is intubating himself with the tracheal tube. Now he can feel the resistance. So now air and intubation through that. And Chandi is ventilating himself now. So ventilation successful, but now he's becoming very unhappy because his mouth is full of saliva. So he requires suctioning and removal of the device. So this was one of very nice presentation of intubating laryngeal mask airway. Back from the fun to the evidence-based medicine. Now you can see on this slide the papers reporting the success rate of intubating laryngeal mask airway. So from the paper of Kapila et al., published in 1997, you can see that there was a 93% success rate and 3% of esophageal intubation at the first attempt. There was some cases of the failures. Then another paper published in the States showed that both blind intubation and fiber optic intubation through the intubating laryngeal mask airway were highly successful. I would like to present one of the key papers published by Mike Ferson and his team in the United States. It was a large series of 254 patients with predicted or known difficult airways intubated through intubating laryngeal mask airway fast track. And you can see that even those patients who weren't intubated blindly subsequently succeeded with fibroscope guided tracheal intubation. The next development of intubating laryngeal mask airway was the optical intubating laryngeal mask airway called laryngeal mask airway C-track. Actually, the Archie Brain and his team had very, very huge promises from this new device, but unfortunately, this device was better for teaching purposes than for real clinical practice. There were two main troubles technically associated with this device. The first one was that the camera was static. So if there was any kind of saliva or any kind of secretion, such as blood and pus, the camera very easily became obstructed and the view was very, very imperfect, not allowing insertion of tracheal tube. The second trouble was that in more than 20% of cases, initially the view was very difficult to obtain. You can see it on this video that after the insertion of the laryngeal mask, you could see really nothing. So you could see pink structures, you could see really the epiglottis, and so you needed some adjustments and movements of the laryngeal mask to obtain the good view. So you could see on this video that it took at most almost 10 seconds to get sufficient view for tracheal intubation. There was the third potential complication with this device as well. And it was that during the fiddling inside the esophageal entry, it can cause regurgitation and aspiration of good gastric contents. So this aspiration has been described and it was described in one case report of Abdi and in one randomized controls trial published by our team. The next device designed specifically by Danish Ambu company for tracheal intubation, but not for blind one, but for that associated with the use of flexible fibroscope was Aura-I laryngeal mask airway. So Dr. McAlewy and myself published the first report in anesthesia in 2010 when the difficult airway management patient was intubated through this device. It wasn't very difficult, but the device didn't have any mechanism to displace the epiglottis, so you had very often obstruction or partial obstruction of the view with the epiglottis, and then it required specific maneuvers with the fibroscope to intubate the patient. In the United States, very popular RQ intubating laryngeal mask airway was approved in 2009 and used in 3 or 4 studies as a conduit for blind and fibroscope-guided tracheal intubation. Success rate of blind intubation in adult patients was very similar to, in one study, very similar to intubating laryngeal mask airway, but in another study, it was quite low. And in a randomized control study comparing intubating laryngeal mask airway, RQ was found as worse conduit for blind tracheal intubation than intubating laryngeal mask airway. This is our study. This is actually the review article on supraglottic airway devices. So on this right slide, you can see that there is a lot of supraglottic airway devices available on the market, but not all of them are available as conduit for fiber optic guided tracheal intubation. You will see on this slide that when we want to intubate a patient with the fibroscope through any supraglottic airway device, we should take in account 2 major points. The first major point is a mechanism for protection of gastric content aspiration. And you can see in red devices having that mechanism. And the second point is wide enough inner diameter of the breathing channel allowing tracheal intubation. Why this is so important? Because in some devices such as laryngeal mask airway supreme, the breathing channel is quite narrow. So if you want to intubate the patient using the flexible fibroscope, you have to use an interstep N3 intubating catheter. So the first one, you insert N3 intubating catheter on the fibroscope through the laryngeal mask airway supreme, and then you remove the laryngeal mask airway supreme, and then you railroad the tracheal tube over the N3 catheter. This is, of course, not only prolonged procedure, but as well, you lose the protection of your airway during that interstep. So that's why it's so advantageous to use the supraglottic airway device with wide enough bore allowing direct intubation through the supraglottic airway device. At the moment, we have 4 or 5 modern second-generation supraglottic airway devices allowing direct fiber optic intubation of and insertion of wide enough tracheal tube through that particular device. And these are Gain laryngeal mask airway, laryngeal mask airway protector, iGel, iGel Plus, and Sacco video laryngeal mask airway. There is a hybrid device called Total Track video laryngeal mask airway, as well mentioned in this table. But as you will see on the later slides, this device is at the moment out of the use. How it started with the iGel. So iGel was invented by Dr. Muhammad Nasir in 2007. It was presented, and the first studies describing the elective airway management through anesthesia were described in literature. Later on in 2007, as you can see on this slide, we intubated the first patient with the fibroscope through the iGel. It was then published in Anesthesia and Analgesia in 2008. And why we use that device? We actually trialed this device mainly in the airway lab, and we were surprised how perfect was the coverage of the laryngeal inlet when evaluated with the fibroscope. And when we had to anesthetize the patient with a learning difficulty and genetic syndrome, who has had 2 previous failed intubations using one of Macintosh blade and the second one with the video laryngoscope. And the patient was, of course, because of his lack of cooperation, unsuitable for awake fiber optic intubation. We decided to use the iGel as the conduit for fiber optic tracheal intubation. Subsequently, we intubated another patient with a genetic syndrome and learning difficulty. And then my good friend Lawrence Taylor with Marin Klein-Bruggener in Switzerland, in Bern, studied the device using a randomized control trial. And then they found that actually the success rate through the iGel is close to 96% with the first attempt. The iGel has improved as well, and we have now a novel iGel called iGel Plus, which should be a better alternative of the classical iGel with wider gastric drainage channel, with better breathing conduit, allowing easier tracheal intubation through that, and with additional port for oxygen supply for passive oxygenation, for example, for resuscitation. And this device was CE-marked in 2020, and a large international multi-center study is underway at the moment. The first results on the first 1,000 patients should be published very soon and are available on a preprint server free of charge. Here on this slide, you can see the first case report published by our team in Anesthesia and Analgesia in 2008, and the subsequent mannequin simulation study comparing blind and fibroscope-guided tracheal intubation on mannequins, published in Resuscitation in 2010. And that simulation study showed that while fiber optic intubation through the iGel is very, very successful, the blind intubation through the iGel is not very successful, and its success rate is between 20 and 30%, and it shouldn't be tried in the first instance. Similar results were confirmed in real patients as well by Klein-Bruggener and Lawrence Taylor in following years. This is a randomized controlled study comparing 3 devices as conduit for fiber optic tracheal intubation. So we compared the tracheal intubation through the iGel with tracheal intubation with the single-use intubating laryngeal mask airway, and then with the C-track laryngeal mask airway. What was shown in this study that fibroscope-guided intubation through the iGel has a very high success rate comparable with the intubating laryngeal mask airway, and the insertion of the device is faster than in other 2 devices. On this slide, you can see the protocol of evaluation of the new device, which is the iGel Plus. We have as well the first series of 10 patients when the fibroscope was used in patients with predicted or unexpected difficult airway management. It's a joint series of our General University Hospital, the University Hospital in Olomouc in the Czech Republic, and the University Hospital in Łódź in Poland by Professor Tomasz Gaszyński. And this case series should be published very soon. And it will be presented at the European Airway Congress in Istanbul this year. So on this limited evidence, we've shown that fiber optic intubation through the iGel Plus is very fast, reliable method, and even unexperienced trainees can use it as their B choice or even A choice for difficult airway management scenarios. On these videos, you can see fiber optic intubation through the iGel Plus. The first one is the insertion of the iGel Plus on the mannequin. So you could see the device is slightly more bulkier, the gastric channel is wider, and the insertion and ventilation, the time to that takes between 5 and 7 seconds. So it's very fast, no need for cuff inflation. And on these videos, you can see fiber optic intubation through the device. So the device has been designed primarily to allow very good coverage of the laryngeal inlet. So you can see that immediately after the insertion, you could see the vocal cords. Usually in 90% of the patients, you have this very unobstructed view to the vocal cords, allowing very fast intubation of the device. And then you can leave the device in situ, so the iGel in situ until the end of surgery, or if you have actually patients scheduled for intraoral surgery or ENT procedure, you can remove the iGel and leave the tracheal tube in place, just using very similar maneuver to intubating laryngeal mask airway. On this slide, you can see the real intubation through the iGel Plus. And you can see that fiber optic view was almost perfect. You could see 90% of the vocal cords. You don't have any epiglottis downfolding. Then inserting the fibroscope through the vocal cords down to the trachea, close to the main carina. And then insertion of tracheal tube through the fibroscope, and the whole procedure takes usually up to 90 seconds, so it's very fast. Another device allowing fiber optic intubation through is Aura Gain laryngeal mask. It has no epiglottis bar or any device for epiglottis removal, but it can allow quite good conditions for fiber optic tracheal intubation. There are studies of Moser and Priest that this device can be used in different difficult airway management conditions as conduit for tracheal intubation. And you can get this kind of views. This is from our series of patients trialed for laparoscopic surgery. So in some patients, you get this view. In some patients, unfortunately, you have downfolded epiglottis, and this position doesn't allow you to intubate the patients directly through the device. In some patients, you can have, with the cuff inflated, that kind of vocal cords. These vocal cords are under full relaxation, but they are externally squeezed by the pressure of inflated laryngeal mask. The next development of the laryngeal mask airway is laryngeal mask airway protector, which should be universal laryngeal mask airway of the second generation, allowing good drainage of the gastric content, as well as good fiber optic guided tracheal intubation. There has been only one study published by Cyprian Mendonca, professor from Coventry, comparing the iGel and laryngeal mask airway protector as conduits for tracheal intubation. And you can see that both devices performed really well. There was not a very big difference between them. But from my clinical practice, I can say that there is one limitation with the laryngeal mask airway protector. As you can see on this slide taken on the mannequin, the video showing inflated protector laryngeal mask airway, and you can see that mainly in the patients with large necks, you can see this kind of image. So the cuff of the laryngeal mask airway is squeezing the supralaryngeal area and sometimes even the vocal cords. Very short presentation of device called Total Track. videolaryngeal mask airway. This is a hybrid device. It combines the features of videolaryngoscope, intubating laryngeal mask airway. It has a drainage channel for gastric contents. There have been studies mainly coming from the inventors of this device from Spain, and they were published in 2019. Disadvantage of this device is that it's quite bulky, it's quite difficult to operate with, and quite a major disadvantage is that the battery is not rechargeable or removable. So once the battery is gone, you can put this device to the bin. So we tried this device in our patients, but we weren't 100% happy. I don't know if this device is still in the market, but there is not very many studies published on the performance of total track videolaryngeal mask airway. This device is Chinese Sacco videolaryngeal mask airway. I must say that this device is very promising. We have trialed the device for 3 years now in our institutions. It can be used for routine airway management. It can be used as well as conduit for tracheal intubations. There have been some studies published on that. So you can see the first one describing its use as a conduit for tracheal intubation and showing its mild superiority over the IGEL supraglottic airway when used as a conduit for tracheal intubation. The second one is our series published in Transit Anesthesia and Critical Care, when it has been used for many indications, including interventional bronchoscopy procedures, but in some cases it was used as well as conduit for tracheal intubation. You can see one of them. This patient had failed previous videolaryngoscopy and he refused awake fiber optic tracheal intubation. And because that time during videolaryngoscopy he was saved with laryngeal mask airway, he had offered asleep tracheal intubation with the supraglottic airway device, concretely with the Sacco videolaryngeal mask airway. And you can see that the view obtained of the vocal cords was quite good, and it allowed quite quick insertion of the tracheal tube. You can see it here. Tracheal tube inserted on the second attempt to trachea and allowed good quality oxygenation and ventilation. We are marching very quickly to the end of this presentation. So the theory is one thing, the practice is different one. While in many countries, supraglottic airway devices are used as conduits for tracheal intubation, in other countries it's not. So you can see a very large analysis of Danish anesthesia database with more than 6,000 patients, 600,000 patients. And you can see that tracheal intubation via supraglottic airway device was used only in 2.6% of patients with difficult airway management. It's, for me, the results of this study are very surprising. I expected quite more from this article, a very recent one, which is an analysis of a national difficult airway database from the United Kingdom, published by Karim El-Bogdadli. And you can see that supraglottic airway use was used in 6.4%. So you can see that for a primary airway plan, it was used not very frequently. Unfortunately, there is no actually mention about the supraglottic airway device used as a plan B, or even supraglottic airway device success rate when used as conduit for supraglottic for fiber optic guided tracheal intubation in difficult airway management. I quite like this paper. It's from the United States, and it's an analysis from the multicenter pediatric difficult intubation registry. And as you can see here, that on this slide, fiber optic intubation through the supraglottic airway had similar first attempt success rate as intubation with the videolaryngoscopy. So in children, when awake fiber optic or videolaryngoscopic intubation is not very feasible, the supraglottic airway device and its subsequent tracheal intubation through that using a fiber optic scope can be very good plan. So in conclusion, this is a final slide, and if you don't remember anything from this presentation, I don't care. But this slide is worth of actually putting down to your memory, because it shows what is the evidence of supraglottic airway devices in difficult airway management. So you can see that we have very, very good evidence for the intubating laryngeal mask airway iGel and even laryngeal mask airway C-track. So these devices, based on the evidence available, should be used as the first choice for difficult airway management. And because LMA C-track is not available anymore, and intubating LMA fast track is actually the first generation supraglottic airway device, I would vote very much for using the iGel and LMA protector instead as your plan A when using supraglottic airway device. And for your clinical practice, you should always use, when in troubles, the second generation supraglottic airway device, allowing the protection against gastric content aspiration. You should use supraglottic airway device with very, very high success rate. So all these supraglottic airway devices should have success rate of insertion more than 95%. You should use supraglottic airway device with a large enough breathing channel for insertion of tracheal tube over the fibroscope. And last but not least, you should always use the supraglottic airway device you are very familiar with. Because if you are in very nervous situation, in very, very difficult scenario, and you use the supraglottic airway device you use for the first or second time, the risk of failure or complications is much, much higher than when you use supraglottic airway device you are very familiar with. EAC 2024 is European Airway Management Congress, which will be held in Istanbul in September 2024. I would like to invite you all from South America to attend this conference. It will be great. It will be full of core lectures, workshops, hands-on stations, and even with the long journey from South America, it's worth of attending. You can see from the last EAC in Antalya, the group of friends, it's Tolga Sorasoglu, the current president of EMS, myself, Max Sorbello, a past president, and Dr. Anil Patel, the famous airway specialist from the UK, the inverter or thrive method. I am very much looking forward to this conference and would be very, very glad to meet you or some of you well in presence there. Thank you very much for attention, and you can see my email address here on this last slide. So if you want to copy it and send me some post questions or some thoughts by email, it will be very, very much appreciated. Thank you very much for attention. Muchas gracias por participación de ustedes. Hasta la vista.
Muchas gracias, querido Pavel. Ha sido extraordinario, creo yo, tu presentación, porque nos ha mostrado una visión muy completa acerca del uso más avanzado de los dispositivos supraglóticos, por lo cual es un aspecto tremendamente importante más allá del uso habitual en las cirugías electivas no invasivas o poco invasivas, procedimientos, y más allá también del rescate mismo de una vía aérea fallida. Entonces, creemos que tu aporte ha sido extraordinariamente relevante en esta oportunidad. Quisiera que antes de pasar a los comentarios, que yo los invito a todos los participantes a hacer comentarios y preguntas en el chat o a levantar la mano si es que quieren formular una pregunta o un comentario de manera directa. Sería extraordinario poder verlos y escucharlos. Pero pasemos primero a las preguntas que nos tiene preparadas después de la charla el doctor Michalek y que vamos a ver ahora en la pantalla. Por favor, Gabriela, si estás por ahí. La primera pregunta es, ¿cuál sería para usted, después de haber escuchado la presentación del doctor Michalek, el dispositivo supraglótico más adecuado para rescatar la vía aérea frente a una intubación fallida con laringoscopía directa? Puede haber dos opciones. La primera es máscara laringea clásica, segunda máscara laringea Cobra PLA, la I-Gel, la máscara laringea flexible o la máscara laringea Fast Track. Puede haber dos correctas. Preguntan por el dispositivo más adecuado para rescatar la vía aérea frente a una intubación fallida con laringoscopía directa. Ahí se están produciendo las votaciones, inclinaciones. Se ha votado por todos los dispositivos, unos más, unos menos. Yo creo que ya estamos listos con la votación. Ahí están los resultados, Pavel. En primer lugar, I-Gel, 67%. Segundo lugar, Fast Track, 40%. Tercer lugar, máscara laringea clásica. Cuarto lugar, máscara laringea flexible. Y en último lugar, la máscara laringea Cobra. No sé, ¿te merece algún comentario?
Okay, I would agree with these answers because I think that they are actually very, very reliable. Classic laryngeal mask airway doesn't allow any protection against aspiration, and it doesn't allow direct insertion of wide enough tracheal tube. Cobra is very bad option because it doesn't protect almost any protection against aspiration. Laryngeal mask flexible is very good in limited mouth opening, but its breathing tube is extremely narrow. So intubation through that is extremely difficult, and as well it doesn't allow any protection against aspiration. So iGel and as well laryngeal mask, airway fast track are good options in that scenario.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Pasemos a la segunda pregunta. La segunda pregunta es, ¿consideraría usted usar una I-Gel como dispositivo de rescate y de conducto para la inserción de un tubo traqueal en una intubación fallida con videolaringoscopio? A. No, preferiría proceder con una intubación fibroscópica con el paciente dormido. B. Sí, con la ayuda de un fibroscopio flexible. C. Sí, la intubación a ciegas a través de la I-Gel es la técnica más adecuada. Y no, procedería directamente con una cricotirotomía. Entonces, si usaríamos una I-Gel como dispositivo de rescate y de conducto para la inserción de un tubo traqueal en una intubación fallida con videolaringoscopio. Se están produciendo las votaciones. Hay dos preferencias más claras. Hay una tercera que empieza a surgir. Esperamos que todos contesten. Creo que ya no hay más votos. Sí. Finalizamos. Esta es la respuesta, Pavel. Entonces,
Yeah, that's perfect. I would agree on 100% because the B option is the only one. Because fiber optic intubation in a sleep patient is the first one. Time consuming, the second one, quite dangerous because you don't protect the airways against aspiration and you have very limited options on oxygenation. You can use actually high flow oxygenation or even Thrive or OptiFlow, whatever, through the face mask or through the side channel of the fibroscope, but it's usually not enough. Fiber optic intubation through the IGL, published, performed in hundreds of cases and a reliable method. Blind intubation through the IGL is not very successful technique because with the original version of the IGL, your tube can be quite easily locked on the arytenoids because of very straight shape of the stem of the IGL, and or it can go into the esophagus. So the risk of esophageal intubation or locking or locked position on the arytenoids is quite high, and of course cricothyrotomy directly after failed laryngoscopy is not very good option because it makes very high burden to the patient.
Y además yo agregaría que si este paciente debe tener una vía aérea difícil genuina, puesto que se trata de una intubación fallida con videolaringoscopio, que todos sabemos que la técnica bien usada tiene un alto grado de eficacia. Entonces no es una vía aérea tan fácil, por lo tanto el uso de fibroscopio flexible podría ser es la indicación más adecuada. Vamos a la tercera y última. Esta es la segunda. Vamos a la tercera. Segunda es. Oh, creo que no la veo.
I see.
¿Puedes poner de nuevo? Yo no la veo. ¿Puedes poner de nuevo la tercera, por favor, Gabriel?
Ya.
Ahí
¿Puedo
está. La
proceder?
tercera pregunta. Este es un caso clínico. Usted insertó una máscara.
Espere.
¿Ya?
Espéreme, doctor, porque si no, no van a poder votar.
Ya. Tú me avisas.
Ahora.
Ya. Entonces, este es un caso clínico. Usted insertó una máscara laríngea Supreme tamaño 5 en un paciente en el que la videolaringoscopía mostró un grado 3 de Cormac-Lehane y desaturó hasta 83%, habiendo tenido dificultad con la ventilación con máscara facial. La máscara Supreme proporcionó sello suficiente de la vía aérea, ventilación suficiente, subiendo la saturación hasta 95% con FiO2 de 60. La cirugía es una colecistectomía laparoscópica electiva en un paciente con un IMC de 35. ¿Qué haría usted a continuación? Discuta las alternativas, más opciones pueden ser correctas. La primera A es la cirugía puede ser completada con la máscara laríngea Supreme como una vía aérea segura, considerando drenar el estómago con una sonda gástrica. B, se puede insertar un tubo 8 montado en un fibroscopio directamente a través de la máscara laríngea Supreme. C, la intubación traqueal directa es imposible debido al lumen estrecho de la máscara laríngea Supreme y se debe usar un catéter Aintree como etapa intermedia. Y D, es posible la intubación a ciegas con un tubo 8 a través de la máscara laríngea Supreme. Entonces ahí les pedimos que voten por alguna de estas alternativas de manejo. Más de una opción puede ser correcta. Por supuesto hay una correcta, pero otra también puede serlo posiblemente con menor porcentaje de eficacia. Muy interesante el caso clínico. Es una intubación videolaringoscópica fallida, y que se rescató la vía aérea con una máscara laringea Supreme. Entonces se pregunta cuál es el siguiente medida a seguir, a tomar en una cirugía intraabdominal electiva en un paciente con obesidad grado 2. Entonces se están produciendo las votaciones. Hay 3 alternativas que han surgido. ¿Qué haría a continuación en un caso así? Muy bien, aquí están las respuestas, Pavel. La mayor cantidad de los participantes se inclinaron por la alternativa C, en que la intubación traqueal directa es imposible debido al lumen estrecho de la máscara laringea Supreme, por lo tanto se debe usar un catéter entry como etapa intermedia. Y después, en segundo lugar, la cirugía puede ser completada con la Supreme como una vía aérea segura, considerando drenar el estómago con una sonda gástrica. ¿Qué te parecen las respuestas?
Okay, so I feel that I would be thinking about A and C as well in this particular patient. There is one option missing, of course, is elective surgery. So the patient could be waken up on the laryngeal mask airway, and second day or one of the following days, they could be, or he could be, or she could be intubated awake with the flexible scope. But when we decide to proceed, I would vote probably for the option A, because even BMI 35 is borderline for the use of supraglottic airway devices. In the literature, these devices have been used frequently for elective laparoscopic surgery, even in obese patients. So once they provide high enough seal pressure and protection against aspiration, I would suck out probably the residual gastric content. I would probably continue on with the Supreme LMA. So for me, probably plan A in this scenario would be the option A.
Mi problema, Pavel, con el plan A, que dices ahí, la cirugía puede ser completada con la máscara laringea Supreme, es que si la máscara laringea Supreme falla durante la cirugía, tengo pocas opciones. La verdad es que yo nunca utilizo un supraglótico de segunda generación en estas cirugías laparoscópicas. Hay colegas que lo hacen, yo no me atrevo, francamente. Por lo tanto, para mí, la mejor opción sería la letra C, utilizando un catéter entry como etapa intermedia, en una cirugía electiva en que se supone que tengo todo el tiempo del mundo para intubar al paciente. No sé qué piensa.
Yeah, of course, both options are possible, and I think that here it depends on the experience of the anesthesiologist, because if you have good enough experience with supraglottic airway devices as airway device for this kind of surgery, I would proceed with option A. While on the other hand, if you would use laryngeal mask airway Supreme just as a life-saving or optional device, I would proceed with plan C as you actually suggested. Yeah, so both options are correct, I would say, and they depend on the experience of the operator. And you have to weigh the risk versus benefits. The risks of plan or option A are the risk of failure in the middle of surgery, but lap chole is very short, and I would consider that risk as low one. In option C, you have to weigh the risk of losing the airway during these interstep maneuvers or regurgitation during the interstep maneuvers. So this patient during supreme removal and insertion of AAC, entry intubating catheter, can regurgitate and aspirate. So the weighing these two options is always.
Muchas gracias, fantástico. Gracias a quienes respondieron esta pregunta. Vamos a ver el chat. Hay algunos comentarios. Algunos comentarios del doctor Roberto González, no sé de dónde nos escribe. Excelente ponencia, doctor Pavel. Muchas felicidades. Del doctor Raúl Silva Quirino, de Brasil. Buenos días y saludos a todos desde Brasil, especialmente al doctor Urtubi y doctor Latrop y doctor Pavel, que nos ha enseñado una gran presentación con gran conocimiento, Pavel. Muchas gracias, doctor Pavel. De hecho, el C-Track ahora más nuevo, el Total Track, que son sin dudas dos grandes máscaras laringeas intubadoras, con la gran ventaja de ya tener pantallas en los dispositivos, lo que facilita en una situación en que sea necesario la intubación tras el dispositivo supraglótico mientras mantiene la ventilación, lo que disminuye mucho el riesgo de traumas de una intubación a ciegas cuando no tenemos el fibroscopio flexible para chequear la intubación. Mi pregunta al doctor Pavel es si hay evidencia de superioridad de estas máscaras laringeas intubadoras con pantalla o sin pantalla asociada, con fibroscopio o lo que estemos más acostumbrados. No sé si han entendido la pregunta.
Okay, so the evidence is limited. The trouble is that laryngeal mask C-Track, which was the first device with the screen, had complications, and it was aspiration during fiddling with the mask and trying to find the good view. And the second one was obstruction of the camera with saliva. So some intubations took long time, some intubations were unsuccessful even. With the hybrid device called Total Track VLM, it was very bulky, so sometimes the insertion into the mouth, mainly in the patients with limited mouth opening, was a nightmare. And I am not aware of any studies apart from Spanish team and Professor Gashinsky trialing this device. Actually, by my mean, the most promising device is Sacco videolaryngeal mask airway. I personally have trialed this device on more than 60 patients at the moment, and the view is surprisingly very good. There are some advantages of this device that is much cheaper than the previous ones because it's a standard laryngeal mask with a special port which is sideways of the bowl, and it's hidden by a glass membrane. So you can use this device without the optic for routine airway management, and its cost is around 25 euros, so it's not very expensive. And you have to buy the special endoscope, very short endoscope, actually attached to the camera, but you can use this endoscope on 500 to 1,000 patients without any limitation. And even in patients with excessive salivation, such as in bronchoscopic surgery, the view is usually very clean, and we have been able to intubate all but one patients on the first attempt using this new device. So if you don't want to bother with buying a fibroscope and actually learning that technique, you can use very, very good alternative, and it's Sacco videolaryngeal mask airway at the moment.
Fantástico. Pavel, te mandan saludos desde Tijuana, México. La doctora Vilma Medina dice gracias por su excelente y valiosa información. desde Tijuana, México.
Sorry, what was the question now?
No, saludos, son saludos. La doctora Vilma Medina te envía saludos desde Tijuana, México. Gracias por
Very
su
good.
excelente y valiosa información.
Thank you.
También el doctor Oscar Tapia, desde Huancavelica, Perú, desde Perú, dice: buenos días, excelente charla, doctor Pavel. Ahora nos permite tener más amplitud en el manejo de la vía aérea difícil. En mi hospital tenemos restricciones al empleo, ello de supraglóticos, me imagino, o de videolaringoscopio, perdón, de fibroscopio. Ello por tener un presupuesto reducido. Le da las gracias por la charla que nos permite tener más amplitud en el manejo de la vía aérea difícil. Desde Perú. Entonces aquí hay otra más, la misma el doctor Tapia, dice: en este caso clínico, tal vez me atrevería a usar la máscara laringia y apoyarme con el bully para realizar un intercambio con tubo endotraqueal. Se refiere al caso clínico número 3, donde frente a una intubación fallida se usó una máscara laringia Supreme para una colecistectomía laparoscópica electiva en un paciente con obesidad clase 2. Y él dice que se atrevería a usar una máscara laringia y avanzaría un bully, me imagino que a través de la máscara laringia, para realizar el intercambio a un tubo traqueal. ¿Qué te parece qué le responderías al doctor Tapia?
Okay, so these were the first techniques used in the 90s. Of course, if you don't have fibroscope available, this is the option, but you must be very careful because blind insertion of the bougie, even soft bougie, can cause trauma. And I completely understand, because we have in Europe some countries as well where the resources are very limited and the use of fibroscope is not common use actually. So in this case, why not use soft bougie with a Cudi tip? But once you feel the resistance during the advancement of the bougie, you should stop, because in that stage you are very probably on the arytenoids or somewhere else. What is good point, I have used bougie 2 or 3 times as well, that once you enter the trachea, you could feel click, 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 such as during bougie-assisted cricothyrotomy, while if you enter the esophagus, it goes slightly, such very similar to insertion of the gastric tube, yeah? So this is good point when using the bougie. As well, good point if you are inside the trachea when using the bougie, if you have the bougie, hollow bougie with the tip inside, is to connect the CO2 track on the end of the bougie and follow if there is any CO2 track on that, yeah? But in that stage, you have to use either Frova catheter or entry catheter or other bougies which allow oxygenation.
Muchas gracias, doctor Tapia, por su pregunta. Creo que estamos llegando al final del webinario. Quisiera darle la palabra al doctor Ricardo Latrop, que es el director del programa de anestesiología de la Universidad Diego Portales, que creo que tiene algunas observaciones.
No tantas observaciones. Yo no soy una persona que tenga ni siquiera el 1% de la experiencia que el doctor Michalek tiene en el sistema supraglótico. La verdad es que yo quiero agradecerle al doctor Pavel, a nuestro amigo Pavel, su participación, su cantidad gigantesca de información, el compartir con nosotros toda su experiencia. Uno mira la presentación y ve una cantidad impresionante de paper encabezados por el doctor Michalek, y evidentemente uno se siente muy confiado en la información que ellos nos entregan. Yo comparto plenamente que abre una serie de opciones nuevas en un paciente de vía aérea difícil, eh, muchas veces con intentos frustrados, con otros mecanismos. Ahora, doctor Michalek, en nombre de la Universidad Diego Portales, de nuestra Facultad de Medicina, de nuestra dirección de posgrado y por supuesto del programa de anestesia de nuestra universidad, quiero agradecerle en nombre de todas las autoridades y por supuesto de nosotros y de los residentes su participación, el compartir con nosotros, el tenerlo esta mañana chilena, tarde europea, eh, y evidentemente darle las gracias a haber querido compartir con nosotros todos sus conocimientos, que para nosotros es un honor y un orgullo tenerlo en nuestros programas de formación de residentes. Quiero agregar y una cosa diferente, que a República Checa le vaya bien en la Eurocopa. Nosotros nos acordamos aquí en Chile, en nuestro Mundial de 1962, que Checoslovaquia fue vicecampeón.
Sí.
Y un saludo muy grande, doctor Michalek, y un agradecimiento de nuevo en nombre de toda nuestra universidad y nuestro programa de formación de anestesiología.
Okay, Dr. Latrop, thank you very much for these very warm, nice words. Actually, it's my honor to be here with you. South America is the only continent I haven't visited in my life, and it's great pleasure for me to be connected with you, at least online, during this webinar, and I hope to visit South America in the future, because it's one of the most beautiful continent, and I am very fond of mountains, and actually 2 of my friends climbed up Aconcagua, our highest mountain in South America, and I would love to come close to. Regarding our Czech football team, I don't remember personally 1962, but my dad actually, who is very fond of football, soccer, and he knew some of these big football players at that time, like Masopust. So it was just history. Our current football team is completely dreadful, and their results during the Euro Cup were really bad. Thank you very much, and hasta luego.
Hasta luego, doctor. Muchas gracias a usted.
Muchas gracias a todos. Gracias, Gabrielita. Gabriela es nuestra webmaster que hace posible todo esto. Ella es la que hace esto tras bambalinas. Gracias al equipo de traducciones remotas, Elisa, Valentina, Benjamín, Eva. Muchas gracias a todos. Los esperamos. Momento, tengo que presentarles lo que viene. Así es que espérenme un poquitito. Estamos en varias redes sociales, en Facebook, en YouTube. Recuerden que todos estos webinarios, para quienes no han tenido la oportunidad de verlo en directo, van a estar próximamente subidos a nuestro canal de Anestesia UDP en YouTube. Pueden verlos completos. Tenemos 4 años de estos webinarios. También en las redes sociales como Instagram y en X también. Y el próximo webinario, ya quedan todos invitados para el sábado 27 de julio a las 10 horas de Chile. Verifiquen su equivalencia horaria, por favor. Vamos a tener al doctor Ross Hofmeier de la Universidad del Cabo de Sudáfrica, hablándonos acerca de la anestesia y nuevas estrategias para el manejo endoscópicos de grandes estenosis de la vía aérea. Es un tremendo tema del cual el doctor Hofmeier es muy experto, así que yo creo que va a ser tremendamente educativo el próximo webinario, así que por favor viralicen este webinario, compártanlo con sus colegas, con sus residentes, para que se beneficien de esta oportunidad de poder acceder a este conocimiento. Les agradezco muchísimo vuestra atención y nos vemos en una próxima oportunidad. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias,
Que
Ricardo.
pasen un buen fin de semana.
Te voy a tener que
Gracias a
llamar.
todos.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.